Ghastly Garlic Episode 46. Cursed Reflections, Shadows of the Hungry Ghosts. Chapter 1, The Awakening. Singapore had always been a city of contrasts, where the old and new coexisted in a delicate balance. High-rise buildings towered over traditional shophouses, and the latest technology mingled with ancient customs. But there was one tradition that even the most modern Singaporean wouldn't dare to ignore. The Hungry Ghost Festival, the 7th month in the Chinese lunar calendar. For as long as anyone could remember, the 7th month was a time of caution and reverence. It was said that during this time, the gates of hell would open, allowing spirits to roam the earthly realm. Families would burn offerings of paper money and food to appease their ancestors, while the streets would be filled with the sounds of guitar performances. Colorful, lively shows meant to entertain both the living and the dead. Lin Hui was a practical woman, not one to believe in superstitions. As a successful lawyer, she had always relied on logic and reason, dismissing old wives' tales as nonsense. But when the 7th month arrived, even she couldn't ignore the atmosphere that descended upon the city. There was something about the air that felt different, thicker, heavier, as if something unseen was lurking just out of sight. Lin Hui's unease began when she received an invitation to a 7th month auction in an old, run-down neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. The invitation was from her childhood friend, Zhong Wei, who had recently inherited a small property in the area. He had insisted that she attend, saying that it was an important tradition and that her presence was necessary. Despite her reservations, Lin Hui decided to go. She hadn't seen Zhong Wei in years, and she thought it might be a good opportunity to catch up. But as she arrived at the location, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, with only a few dim streetlights illuminating the narrow alleyways. The houses were old and dilapidated, their windows dark and empty. A large tent had been set up in an open space, with rows of plastic chairs arranged in front of a small stage. A few people milled about, their faces shadowed and indistinct in the dim light. Zhong Wei greeted her with a wide smile, but there was something strange about his eyes, something that made Lin Hui's skin crawl. "I am glad you came," he said, his voice too cheerful. "It's been too long." Lin Hui forced a smile. "Yes, it has. How have you been?" "Oh, you know, keeping busy. But enough about me. Let's enjoy the auction, shall we?" Lin Hui nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The auction began, and as the items were presented, antique furniture, old paintings, and other odd trinkets, she felt a growing sense of unease. The people around her seemed unnaturally focused on the items, their eyes glinting with a strange intensity. As the auction continued, Lin Hui's attention was drawn to a large, ornate mirror that was brought onto the stage. The frame was made of dark wood, intricately carved with scenes of demons and spirits. The surface of the mirror was cloudy, as if obscured by a layer of mist. "This mirror is said to be a powerful artifact," the auctioneer announced, his voice low and reverent. "It is believed to be a gateway to the spirit world, capable of revealing the truth of one's soul." Lin Hui felt a chill run down her spine. There was something about the mirror that made her want to look away, but she couldn't. She was drawn to it, as if something deep inside her was being pulled toward it. The bidding for the mirror was fierce, but in the end, it was Zhong Wei who won it. He turned to Lin Hui with a grin that sent a shiver through her. "I had to have it," he said, his voice low. "It's the key to everything." Lin Hui didn't know what he meant, but she knew one thing for sure: she had to get out of there. Chapter 2, The Mirror's Secret. Lin Hui left the auction as quickly as she could, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know why, but she felt as if she was being watched, as if something had followed her from the auction, something that wasn't entirely human. When she arrived home, she locked the door behind her and leaned against it, trying to catch her breath. But the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. It lingered in the corners of her mind, like a shadow that refused to be banished. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the mirror, its cloudy surface, the dark, intricate carvings. She tossed and turned, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the image from her mind. The next morning, she decided to confront Zhong Wei. She called him, but there was no answer. She tried again and again, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Frustrated, she decided to go to his apartment. When she arrived, she found the door slightly ajar. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she pushed it open. "Zhong Wei," she called out, her voice trembling. There was no answer. She stepped inside, her heart pounding. The apartment was dark, the curtains drawn. The air was thick and heavy, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. She made her way to the living room, where she found Zhong Wei sitting in front of the mirror, his back to her. The mirror was propped up against the wall, its surface as cloudy as she remembered. "Zhong Wei," she said again, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't respond. He was staring into the mirror, his eyes wide and unblinking. Lin Hui felt a surge of panic. She rushed to his side and shook him. "Zhong Wei, snap out of it." But he didn't move. His skin was cold to the touch, and there was something strange about his face, something unnatural. She looked into the mirror, and what she saw made her blood run cold. It wasn't Zhong Wei's reflection staring back at her. It was something else, something dark and twisted, with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. She stumbled back, her heart racing. The figure in the mirror seemed to be laughing, its mouth stretching into an impossible grin. She ran out of the apartment, her mind reeling. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew one thing for certain: the mirror was cursed. Chapter 3: The Haunting. Lin Hui tried to put the incident behind her, but the mirror haunted her every waking moment. She saw it in her dreams, in the reflections of windows and puddles, in the shadows that lurked in the corners of her vision. She began to notice strange things happening around her. Objects would move on their own, lights would flicker, and she would hear whispers in the dead of night. She tried to tell herself it was all in her head, but the fear gnawed at her, growing stronger with each passing day. One night, she woke to the sound of someone breathing in her ear. She bolted upright, her heart pounding, but there was no one there. The room was empty, but she could feel a presence, something dark and malevolent, watching her from the shadows. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to get rid of the mirror. She returned to Zhong Wei's apartment, determined to destroy it. But when she arrived, she found the apartment empty. Zhong Wei was gone, and the mirror was missing. Panic set in. She searched the apartment, but there was no sign of him or the mirror. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. She returned home, her mind racing. She didn't know what to do, but she knew she couldn't stay in her apartment. She felt like she was being watched, like something was lurking just out of sight, waiting to strike. She packed a bag and left, not knowing where she was going. She just needed to get away, to escape the darkness that had taken hold of her life. But no matter how far she ran, she couldn't escape the mirror's curse. It followed her, haunting her every step, its presence growing stronger and more oppressive. She knew she couldn't run forever. She had to face it, whatever it was. And so, she returned to the place where it all began, the old neighborhood where the auction had taken place. Chapter 4: The Confrontation. The neighborhood was just as she remembered it, dark, silent, and filled with an eerie sense of foreboding. The tent and stage were gone, but the memory of the auction lingered in the air, like a ghostly echo. Lin Hui made her way to the spot where the auction had been held, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she knew she had to find the mirror, to confront whatever was haunting her. As she reached the clearing, she saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was Zhong Wei. "Zhong Wei," she called out, her voice trembling. He turned to face her, but there was something wrong. His eyes were empty, his face twisted into a grotesque grin. "You're too late," he said, his voice cold and hollow. "The mirror has claimed me, and now it will claim you too." Lin Hui felt a surge of terror, but she forced herself to stand her ground. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "I won't let it." Zhong Wei laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the clearing. "You have no choice. The mirror is a gateway, a portal to the spirit world. Once it has you, there's no escape." Lin Hui backed away, her mind racing. She had to do something, anything, to stop the mirror's curse. She looked around, searching for something she could use. Her eyes fell on a small shrine at the edge of the clearing, filled with offerings of food and incense. Without thinking, she grabbed one of the incense sticks and lit it, holding it out in front of her like a weapon. The smoke curled into the air, filling the clearing with a thick, pungent scent. Zhong Wei's grin faltered, and he took a step back. "Stop!" he hissed, his voice filled with fear. But Lin Hui didn't stop. She held the incense closer, chanting an old prayer her grandmother had taught her as a child. The smoke grew thicker, swirling around her like a protective shield. Zhong Wei let out a scream, his body convulsing as the smoke enveloped him. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Zhong Wei was gone, and the clearing was silent once more. Lin Hui collapsed to the ground, her body trembling. She didn't know what had just happened, but she knew one thing for sure: the mirror's curse was broken. But as she looked up, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The mirror was there, lying on the ground in front of her. Its surface was no longer cloudy, but clear enough for her to see her reflection. But it wasn't her reflection that stared back at her. It was Zhong Wei's. Chapter 5. The curse continues. Lin Hui ran. She didn't know where she was going, but she ran as fast as she could. The image of Zhong Wei's reflection burned into her mind. She had broken the curse, or so she thought, but the mirror still held power over her. She returned home, her thoughts a jumbled mess of fear and confusion. The mirror was gone, but its presence lingered, haunting her every step. She could feel it, like a dark shadow looming over her, waiting to claim her as it had claimed Zhong Wei. Days turned into weeks, but the fear never left. Lin Hui became a shell of her former self, paranoid and sleepless, haunted by the reflection that wasn't hers. One night, she heard a knock on her door. She hesitated, her heart pounding. No one visited her anymore. She had isolated herself from the world, too afraid to face whatever was out there. The knocking continued, louder and more insistent. Gathering what little courage she had left, she opened the door. There was no one there, but on the ground, lying in the doorway, was the mirror. Lin Hui's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, but she was frozen in place, staring at the mirror that had returned to her. Slowly, as if drawn by an invisible force, she picked it up. The surface was clear, reflecting her pale, trembling face, but as she stared into it, the reflection began to change. Her features twisted, morphing into something dark and grotesque. And then, she saw it, Zhong Wei, smiling that twisted grin, his hollow eyes staring back at her. "Welcome back," his voice echoed in her mind. Lin Hui screamed, dropping the mirror. It shattered on the floor, but the reflection remained, hovering in the shards like a broken ghost. She backed away, her mind unraveling. The curse was stronger than ever, and she knew there was no escape. The mirror had claimed Zhong Wei, and now it was coming for her. She ran to the shrine, the last place where she had felt any semblance of safety. But as she reached it, she saw that the offerings were gone, replaced by ashes. The incense sticks were burnt out, leaving only the faint smell of smoke in the air. She collapsed to the ground, sobbing. The mirror's power was too strong, its curse too deep. There was no escaping it. As the night wore on, the shadows grew longer, and the air grew colder. Lin Hui felt the darkness closing in, the weight of the curse pressing down on her. She knew what she had to do, but the thought of it terrified her. She had to confront the mirror one last time, to face the darkness within it. She had to destroy it, or it would destroy her. But deep down, she knew that the mirror couldn't be destroyed. It was a part of her now, a reflection of her soul, twisted and corrupted by the curse. She returned to her apartment, the shattered mirror still lying on the floor. She picked up a shard, its surface reflecting her tear-streaked face. And then, she saw it again, Zhong Wei, smiling that same twisted grin. "Join me," his voice whispered. Lin Hui's hands trembled as she held the shard closer to her face. The reflection grew clearer, more vivid, until it was all she could see. And then, with a final, desperate cry, she plunged the shard into her chest. The pain was brief, a sharp, searing agony that faded into darkness. She fell to the ground, her blood pooling around her, mixing with the shattered glass. As her vision blurred, she saw the reflection of Zhong Wei, his grin fading into a look of sorrow. "Welcome," he whispered, his voice soft and distant. And then, there was nothing. Epilogue. The legacy of the mirror. Lin Hui was never found. Her disappearance became one of the many unsolved mysteries that haunted the city, a tale whispered in hushed tones during the 7th month. But those who knew the truth, the few who had seen the mirror, knew that her fate was sealed the moment she had laid eyes on it. The mirror was never recovered, its whereabouts unknown. But the stories persisted, passed down from generation to generation, a warning to those who dared to challenge the darkness. And every year, during the 7th month, The people of Singapore would burn their offerings and whisper their prayers, hoping to appease the spirits that walked among them. But deep down, they knew that the curse of the mirror would never truly be broken. It was a part of the city now, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. And so, the legacy of the mirror continued, a dark reflection of the fears that dwelled in the hearts of the living. For in the 7th month, the line between the living and the dead was thin, and the shadows of the past could never be truly forgotten. The end.
Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. If you enjoyed our exploration of ghosts, mythical creatures, and urban legends, please share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling episodes. Until next time, my beloved listeners.